2020 giveth and 2020 taketh away. We finally thought we had a glimmer of good news in the sports world last week with the announcement of the NBA's return, but it turns out some players may not be as excited as Phil Simms to get to Disney World. The NBA is putting a dome around Disney World to continue their season, the UFC is building a dystopian fight island, and the MLB is, well, nobody's really sure what the hell the MLB is doing, and Snoop Dogg is now apparently an NBA insider. 2020 is weird, man. Welcome to Pure Point Weekly. My name is Jeff Blackton.
And I'm Xavier Barnett.
We are back again with another episode of Pure Point Weekly here, where we discuss all of the goings-on in the NBA world and the basketball world in general, which right now is just the NBA world because no other league is actually starting up again yet. I heard something about the WNBA maybe doing a 22-game season or something. We're pretty sure college basketball isn't going to have a season. And, I mean, does anyone really know what's happening with the EuroLeague? So, right now, we're going to talk NBA because it's the only thing that we actually have news on. And we'll start with the most earth-shattering, impactful, and possibly devastating change of all. The NBA has moved the start date from the previously announced July 31st to July 30th.
I can't believe it. They're just showering us with good news. Instead of waiting one day, we get that day off and we get it sooner.
Complete disregard for player safety right there. What are they going to do without that day of getting into game shape?
Yeah, I don't know. A lot of players might need the help getting into game shape.
Apparently, Luka Doncic is going to need all of the days he can get.
Yeah, his trainer is saying he's definitely not in shape for the NBA. He's nowhere near. That's what he says.
The question that I would ask that trainer is, in your opinion, has Luka Doncic ever been in shape for the NBA?
That is a good question.
Like, don't get me wrong, top 5 player in the game right now, in my opinion. Incredible player, but athleticism has never exactly been a big part of his game.
That's true, you know. Like some players, he has a high basketball IQ, and when you have a high basketball IQ, you're always going to be good at the game.
And talent.
You're going to be where you need to be. Yeah, and talent. Let's not forget that.
He reminds me of the type of guy that would be in the gym just playing basketball all day, working on his game, and not actually hitting the weight room at all or anything.
Yeah, those guys. He does. I do know those type of characters that do that. You know, they come in and just dominate the entire game, and you're just like, wow, I'm dedicating all my time, and he's just better than me.
Like when you're a high school kid or whatever, and you're all cocky, you're playing basketball with your kids, and like the chubby old dude comes in and joins the pickup game, and everyone just thinks it's hilarious, so they put him on the best team just because they think he's gonna make them worse, but then he takes over and dominates the whole game, drops like 50 on you.
Yeah, that always. You know, that's so funny. That actually happened in this one pickup league. Well, not a pickup league, but it was this league for my city. And the players, I wasn't part of it. I just kind of came to watch my friends play because I was working at the time, so I could never play. But I watched this one team, and it was pretty much all those players that you described, and they just pretty much dominated. They were like the second best team in that like small mini league, and it was out of 8 players. So
I guess too is when you have that group of like old out of shape players and that, they always seem to like have the best chemistry on the face of the planet too.
For sure, right? Like we said, high basketball IQ too goes a long way.
They just pull off these ridiculous passes, and somehow their jump shots look awful. Like their form is terrible, but it always falls.
Yeah, that and their dribbling. Their dribbling is like always like super high. Like now you're supposed to keep your dribble like to your not your chest, but like to your hips. Like these level, guys go all the waist level. These guys go like to shoulder level when they're dribbling, and then they dribble with such force the ground literally like shakes from the sheer strength. They're all like post experts too, right?
Just pound the ball super hard into the ground, so it makes that weird like the noise when you would peg someone on the head with a dodgeball in school.
Yeah, that noise.
That exact
It's
same.
like so loud. And then it bounces so high, and you're just like, how are we not able to steal the ball from this guy? Like,
And then you just go home
literally
so
every shot.
depressed too if you're the guy who had to guard him, because you're just so disappointed in yourself when you leave. You weren't expecting it. You were ready to slack off on D that game, and it's just like, nah, all right. You're like, I'm gonna be the rebounder this game. It's all good, and then he just dominates.
Yeah, that's what
So
that's pretty much Luka Doncic.
that's it's Luka
But the
Doncic in a
NBA
nutshell,
version on
right there.
steroids.
Him and apparently formerly Nikola Jokic, because apparently Nikola Jokic is now like a beanpole. I mean, you just brought this up to me. I didn't even know about it, about Jokic losing all that weight, but you look at him now, and he's almost mistakable for Kristaps Porzingis.
Yeah, it was a totally different side. I couldn't even believe it. I believe it was him. I'm like, is that same guy? He just looked like a giant stick, like waving around. A lot of people asking if it's going to be good for his game. Time will tell. We'll see what happens.
His game is one of the hardest to judge that question for, because yeah, he's a center, but really he kind of plays point guard.
Yeah, for sure. Will that really affect his passing? I don't think so. With no matter how many weight.
The
I
question
mean,
is, will he be as much of a post threat anymore? And honestly, like he's so good at passing out of the post anyway. Even if you do stop and he can't back you down anymore, he's probably just gonna do the same thing he would have done before anyway.
yeah. So we'll see. Maybe he can get some shots up. Pull a Kevin Durant. You know.
I gotta say though, he definitely looks a lot better than he did before. Like he legitimately looks 10 years older. Like it looks like he just lost his baby fat.
Yeah, I remember they were showing a side by side comparison of him in the interview, and it just looked like the old Joker was pretty much like he divided himself, and now he's like half of what he used to be. Pretty much, like
He went from Glenn Davis to Dirk Nowitzki.
yeah, pretty much. I think that's the perfect comparison. Big baby Glenn Davis, Dirk Nowitzki. That's pretty much what it is.
It reminds me of that one year we all had. I don't know why I'm referencing school so much at the beginning of this podcast, but I swear we're gonna get through it. We're gonna do this together. Um, it reminds me of, there was always that one year in elementary school that it was like the wall, and I don't want to say it's puberty because I'm not sure if that's really a puberty thing or not. I'm not enough of an expert. But that one year where you'd hit it where half of the class would come back, where they'd all lose their baby fat in that one year and just be about like 7 stages more attractive than all of the other kids who are still holding their baby fat and full of acne and stuff. And that's when you get that divide in the class. That's when you start to know which people in the class are going to end up being the popular people. and and which people are going to end up doing an NBA podcast 17 years later. But yeah, so
Are you trying to say something, Jeff?
So yeah, Jokic is back, Doncic is back, the NBA is back. Well, I should say, coming back. They're looking at opening back up with kind of an opening transaction window on the first week of July before they start quarantining everybody to try to kick things off for July 30th. The idea is to have a 14-day quarantine period, and then everyone kind of gets a little bit back into shape, and then they kick off this 8-game kind of play-in to the playoffs. There was a little bit of a resistance that came out recently from the players, because at the beginning, it was weird. Everyone kind of seemed for it in the beginning. You didn't really hear anything about anyone coming out or talking against it, aside from that one comment from Damian Lillard, but that came before we really had any solid information to go off of, right? Now,
yeah, for sure.
Now that we do, we have a bunch of players, apparently, according to Woj, could be north of 40 players that are concerned about returning to play in the Dome for a myriad of reasons, right? There's not wanting to risk injuries when you have a minimal chance at the playoffs. There's obviously coronavirus. There's wanting to make stands on social justice stuff that's going on right now rather than the NBA. You know, a lot of players thinking that that's more important, especially those ones that are those fringe playoff teams where they're like, what would I rather do? Go back and play 8 games for no reason when we're not going to make the playoffs anyway, or use my voice and my position to take a stand on everything that's going on right now, right? Because you can't really do both, because you're going to be stranded inside of a dome in Disney for what I was looking at was, I think, a minimum of 53 days. It would end up being 14 of the teams would be done within 53 days. The maximum would be 82 days, obviously, for the teams that make it to the finals, if worst case scenario happens where they end up playing 7 games every single playoff series or something, right?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Some players, it is a strange time, for certain, right? So it is interesting. I don't know what players. They didn't name any players too, which is interesting. It's just a bunch of players. So we'll see.
The only one I know for sure is that Carmelo said something against it.
I didn't even see that.
He didn't want to come back. But the thing is, I don't think it's, for the most part, going to be tier 1 players, right? I think it's because the guys, at the end of the day, these guys, their whole goal coming into every year is still to win an NBA championship, right? So I have a hard time believing that the guys who are on teams that are seeded like 1 through 4 or something like that, or 1 through 6 maybe right now, are questioning this, right? But when you start to get to the guys like maybe someone like, I don't know, a DeMar DeRozan, on the Spurs, where LaMarcus Aldridge is injured for the year, the Spurs don't have much of a chance anyway at getting in. Let's be real. The only reason that they made this long enough to have the Spurs even still get in it is because they want to give the Spurs a chance at keeping the playoff streak alive.
Yeah.
But
it looks like it's finally going to end this year.
Yeah, like there would have to be a ridiculous miracle for the Spurs to manage to take the 8th seed and actually get into the playoffs.
Yeah, so yeah, you're right. I don't think it would be tier 1 because I remember LeBron saying the NBA is definitely coming back. So it's not.
Yeah, if you're LeBron, if you're Giannis, if you're Kawhi, and that, you have a chance at winning a championship. I think you're going to toe the line for the most part, and I don't say that in a bad way, because obviously LeBron's not afraid to take a stance on social issues or come out and say anything. But LeBron can. Some of these guys have a big enough name that they can still make an impact on the movements that they're trying to make an impact on while being quarantined inside of the bubble. But some of them aren't, right? Or some of them, it affects a little bit more and want to make more of an impact, right? Like comes to mind is like a guy like Patrick Beverley, right? Might, even though he's on a team that's high up, he's been known to be outspoken against for social issues in the past. Had a rough life growing up, and that was involved in a lot of stuff that is, what is in the news right now, right? So he might be a guy that you look at that might decide, this is more important right now, this year, right? Certain guys like that, but I don't think any of the tier 1 guys are going to be doing it. The tier 2, tier 3 guys maybe. But, and again, I'm not saying that to say that they don't care as much or anything like that. It's just some guys have a better position to. It's not so much different priorities too, because I don't want to make it seem like they don't have this as a priority. But like if you're LeBron James and you make a Twitter, like if you post on Twitter about something, a lot of people are going to see that. A lot more people than are going to see it if you're Lou Williams, right? So
yeah, no, for sure.
There's, it's a different. You have to hold them to a little bit of a different caliber kind of, you have to realize that what they realize, because they're not stupid people. These are smart people. They know how to, they know what their reach is, they know what their platforms are, and they know how to use their platforms, right? So, and they know better than us how to use their platforms. So, us sitting here and discussing, who's going to be better off doing it one way or another, they have full teams of people and, have lived through it themselves to know how to best use their platform and use their voices to impact the world in the ways that they want to impact the world. So, obviously that's something there. I think something that people are undervaluing in this, though, too, is the players not wanting to come back and risk getting hurt, right? Because you're coming back for 8 games. It's like what Damian Lillard said before. It still kind of rings true, right? Like, Damian Lillard didn't say what he said because of coronavirus. He wasn't so much worried about catching coronavirus as he was, what's the point in coming back and risking that, possibly catching coronavirus, on top of possibly risking injury if we don't have a chance, right? Now, he hasn't said anything since. I don't think he's planning on setting out now based on the platform that they came out with, right? Because they do have a chance with the structure that has, like Portland, that is, does have a chance with the structure that's been announced. But that thought process still holds true for a lot of teams, right? If you're someone on the Spurs, if you're someone on the Suns, if you're someone on the Kings, right? Do you want to risk coming back after having 3 months off, possibly not being in the best shape, kind of a little bit of a half-assed off-season kind of warm-up little thing to get into those 8 games, and that obviously that's going to increase your risk of getting hurt, and for much less payoff than what would be if you were to just sit it out and wait for the start of the next season.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's a big point, right? And especially some players are probably entering contract years, and what's the point of risking injury in your contract year and then kind of take you out of getting more money as well? So, like you said, there is a myriad of reasons of why players wouldn't want to be okay with this. And I understand where they're coming from as well, right? It's, you want to maintain your business and your brand as well on top of that too. So, sometimes it's okay to kind of look out for your best interests as well. I'm not asking them not to. So it does make sense where they're coming from. It's still a bummer, but yeah, like I said, it's okay to look out for your best interests.
Another thing too that people might be overlooking is that a lot of these players in the NBA are just, they're in their early 20s, their mid 20s, their late 20s, and they're just getting into the family mode, right? Where they're starting families and stuff like that. So they have young kids at home and stuff that are going through COVID-19 as well, right? Like, it's not just the players that are going through this. The players' families are struggling through COVID-19 as well, just like all of us are, right? They have kids that are being held home from school and that too, whose lives are getting shaken up and stuff right now, right? And that is a big deal, for people that have families, not wanting to leave their families to go and live in a bubble in Orlando and not see their families for possibly 7 weeks, right? Like a minimum of 7 weeks before the NBA, at least from what they've released, a minimum of about 7 weeks without seeing visitors, without seeing family members. And if you leave the bubble for any temporary reason and you're going to return, you then have to do a 10-day quarantine in the bubble again before you can even rejoin your team, right? So for the guys that have, young kids and stuff, they're weighing that decision a little bit heavier.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, not everyone's, a young adult and and it doesn't really matter if they don't see people, right? But like, we do see, and I know you hate these shows, but reality TV shows, like how people struggle from not seeing their family for even like 39 days. We're asking them to not see their kids possibly for 81 whole days, and at bare minimum, you said 51 days, so it's not it's not like it's not super easy. Plus, obviously, if you try to leave, You have the 2 weeks of quarantine. So it's a big ask
Yeah. And
for the
and
players to be
and
okay with that.
and too, as a parent of a kid, like if you're a father whose kid has been taken out of school, you've already taken away the interactions with most of their friends right there. Now they've gotten used to interacting with you and the family and that, and then they take you away too, and you leave in most cases one other person for this kid to interact with now, maybe with you on Skype calls still, but it's a shock to a child, right? So, they have to think about that as well. Another thing that they have to think about, though, that's weighing on it as well, is that the players who opt not to attend out of the 22 teams will lose out on salary. Now, the NBA has come out and said that they're not going to suffer any league discipline, right? But they will lose out on salary, while the players on the 8 teams that aren't going to Orlando are not taking salary hits.
That's interesting. So I just want to clarify this because I didn't see this rule. So the players, players are taking salary hits, and then the players aren't.
Well,
Then
no,
the players in the
there's
eight.
like a general prorated salary hit that everyone's taking because they missed so much of the season and stuff like that, right? But of like the salary that is left on their contracts that will be paid out, the 8 teams that aren't going to Orlando, because it would be unfair to not pay them when it's not their control, right? That you have told them stay home, right? It's like giving an employee leave or something, right? You told them to stay home, so they're getting paid, right? But of these 22 teams, you're telling these players to come here and play. You're telling them there's not going to be any discipline, they're not going to be suspended or anything like that if they opt to not show up, but you are going to take a cut from their salary for doing so, which, you could argue a fairness point with that as well.
Yeah. No, that makes sense, right? Because I guess this goes back to the conspiracy theory. Oh, Zion wants to make the playoffs, so some teams are going to suffer if the players don't come and play. So that's another thing too. Like, I know B and C tier players, or not tier players, but that's a bad way to put it. B level, I guess. B and C level players.
Yeah, they're not
Their
superstars.
paychecks are, yeah, they're not the superstars, right? They're not making as quite as big as much, and who knows, maybe this might affect them, so they have to come and play as well for some other players to play. So
Uh,
it's kind of
I think most
it's
NBA players are gonna be all right. It's not like NHL players or baseball players
yeah,
or minor league players. I think most NBA players would be okay one way or another, but there is the fairness argument to be had there when you're paying the guys on the 8 teams that aren't gonna be there, but you're not gonna pay the 22 guys. Now, at the end of the day, I get it. The NBA is a business, and if you were to apply it to a regular standard 9 to 5 workplace, that's pretty much how it would go down, right? If you had a group of people that you were saying you guys can stay home, but another group of people where you're saying, but you guys have to work, and then people from that group that have to work are saying, no, I don't want to work, then that's how it would work in the real world too, right? They would pay those people that they told not to come, and they would not pay the people that didn't want to. But the NBA, it doesn't work on the same rules as a 9 to 5.
yeah, no, for sure. They definitely do not. So it's kind of it's an interesting dilemma, right? Is it fair? Is it not? Um, I'm kind of more in the camp of I think it is kind of fair because they were asked to work and they're not working. Even so, it's I do understand the frustration as well, but you know it's like you said, they're probably not struggling for work, so they'll probably be fine, and it's always next year to
Yeah.
get paid the full salary. So guess you got to budget a little bit more.
The official motto of the Cleveland Browns. There's always next year. Um, So teams are the teams that are going to be coming to the tournament. They are letting them expand or tournament. I guess not really a tournament. This weird pseudo tournament, pseudo season completion thing that we got going on here. They're going to allow the teams to expand their rosters from 15 to 17, just in case, because they do have to quarantine them for 14 days, right? So if you have a guy go down with an injury during that time period and you need to fill that roster spot or that playing time, it's going to suck if a guy has to quarantine for 14 days before being able to join the team, right? So they're expanding the rosters to 17 players. Teams are allowed to bring 35 people total per team, so that's players and team personnel. Now, the thing is, both players and team personnel are going to be expected to submit to medical record checks. Now, for some people, there is an issue of privacy there as well. Now, you gotta think for the players, they kind of have to do this anyway, because you pass physicals and that. Sure, you might not have to disclose whether you have certain illnesses or whatever to them, but I feel like most players probably do, or most team staffs figure it out one way or another. However, for the team personnel, there's a little bit of a privacy factor involved there. What if you have some type of an illness that you don't want people to know about, or an injury or something like that, something that's not contagious, obviously, right? That, you don't want people to know about it. There's a little bit of an invasion of privacy there.
Yeah. No, I see it is a little bit of invasion of privacy, but they are trying to get this league going right, so it does make sense that they do want the medical records to see if they have been infected beforehand and didn't tell anyone or anything like that. So I can kind of see where they're coming from. The heart's in the right place, but maybe the execution is a bit off.
I think what they're coming from for a lot of it is the protection of the people that they're doing the testing on, and that, because obviously we know that this virus is more deadly to people who have compromised immune systems and to the elderly and that, right? So if someone has something in their background or their past or their history where they are immune compromised, then they might not want that person to come along for their own well-being.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I wanted to add something, but now I kind of lost my train of thought, so that's great. That's awesome. Woo! But, yeah, I can't bring it back. Sorry
Yeah, no
about
worries.
that.
So, of the other sort of rules that they're kind of like hashing these rules out as they go along. So everything's kind of subject to change as it is. But as of about an hour before we started this podcast, the basic rules were that there are going to be quote unquote replacement players available, right? The idea is, if a player opts out and to not join, right, it's essentially treated as if they would have been suspended by the league in terms of roster ramifications, right? Where the team is allowed to replace that player, but if a player gets designated for replacement, then they can't come back.
Okay. And that's where I was going. That was my next question, actually. So, with the whole roster thing going on, so where are they going to get the replacement players from? Is it going to be from other teams, or is it going to be just free agency guys that don't have any playing or anything like that?
So there's a couple kind of asterisks that go along with this here. When the season starts, there is I believe it's going to be a 10-day sort of transaction period where teams are allowed to sign players, waive players, do regular transactions, and even the 8 teams that aren't involved are going to be allowed to participate in this and make these transactions and that. But after that period, that 10-day transaction period, anyone who is not on an an NBA roster or a G League roster will become ineligible to be a replacement player, right? So the idea is any player who has played in the NBA or G League this season that is not currently under contract with another team, i.e., excluding free agents, right? So they have to have played on a team, been on a roster in either the NBA or the G League this season, is eligible as a replacement player that can be signed by these teams during that period, right? Also, during that 1 week transaction period, if they do sign any players that are free agents, then they are allowed to participate as well, but they have to be in that period and go through the quarantine just like the rest of the players, right? The exception to that is international players. So international players that have not played in the NBA this season are ineligible, period. Right? So say, for example, Nikola Mirotic, right? Ineligible. A team can't sign him and bring him in. And that's the basic sort of framework that they're going off of for the replacement players, at least at this moment. So anyone who is officially on one of those 22 teams rosters by the end of that 10-day transaction period is eligible to be used as a replacement player.
Okay, that makes sense then.
And that includes G League call-ups as well.
Okay. Also, Taco Fall can come to the Celtics. It's great.
As long as it's in that 10-day window and he's under contract, he's good to go.
Okay, they better bring him. Now that they have 17,
call
him up.
I don't necessarily think that's top priority for them.
Yeah, fair enough.
Let's get the 7-footer who can play 4 minutes per game out here, and it might foul out in that 4 minutes.
Yeah, that's so true. But yeah, so that's it's gonna be interesting to see. What's the Boogie situation? Because is he a free agent? Considered a free agent, or is it still considered?
He is currently a free agent because the Lakers did release him. He hasn't played in the NBA this season, so in order to be eligible, a team would have to sign him during that 10-day transaction period.
Okay.
To the active roster, too.
Thinking Celtics might have to make a move.
The question is DeMarcus Cousins really healthy? Like, is he recovered? Would he even want to play? Would he want to risk coming back for this 8-game stretch run thing, especially when he's had severe injuries in each of the last 3 years of his life, basically? Would you rather just sit it out and fully recover? He tried to come back last year, and that backfired on him. So,
yeah, that's true. And then he tried to do a freebie for the free weight ring, but kind of backfired on him, and now his worth is a lot less than what it was when he was. The
thing with him though is that even when he's come back and played in the short spurts that he's been able to between the injuries, he's still looked pretty much just as good. So in shorter minutes, obviously, less minutes at a time, obviously. But I mean, again, this is, a re-injury to an injury again, right? So it's possible that he might not be able to come back at the same speed. But for what I've seen, I don't have any reason to believe that their drop-off is going to be immense enough that he can't get himself a roster spot, right? I think he'll be a guy that'll next year end up on a team as the backup center, competing, maybe get into that starting center spot for a bit, but a guy who's going to have probably some minutes restrictions for the rest of his career that are probably going to be in the 20 to 25 minutes per game range.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm trying to think of who else might be
Well,
Big-time
the big
free
one is
agent in
Jamal
this league.
Crawford. Jamal Crawford has been a free agent all year. No one signed him all year long, right? So in order for him to be eligible as a replacement player, someone has to sign him during that transaction window.
Ooh, it's interesting. Someone should. If he
I don't
wants to play,
understand
though.
why Jamal Crawford hasn't been signed. He does. I follow him on Twitter, and he's constantly, every time someone says, hey, why isn't Jamal Crawford in the league? He's retweeting it and going, yeah, come on. So, I mean,
Yeah,
there isn't really an argument that Jamal Crawford isn't good enough to play in the NBA. The question is he the right fit for a lot of these teams? And I think it sounds cliche as hell to say, but honestly, the Lakers could be a great fit for a guy like Jamal Crawford to come in off the bench.
yeah, that's actually, I could see that working.
Like, they don't need to worry
Yeah.
about defense. They're a great defensive team. We all know Jamal Crawford cannot play defense, but
Yeah.
they're a great defensive team already, and they need backup guards. We know that. I mean, they have, Rajon Rondo and Danny Green. That's pretty much it for guards. Like, what else? Do they have another guard on the roster? So it's whatever you consider Caruso. Is he a guard? Is he a small forward? I don't even know. Is he the team water boy? Like, I'm not sure what actual position he gets titled as. Almost all-star Alex Caruso. But I think a guy like Jamal Crawford coming into the Lakers would be a great boost to a team like that.
Yeah, no, that's actually a pretty good point. I didn't even know Jamal Crawford wasn't even playing, so that's crazy.
Well, he is,
That's insane.
39, 38, 39 years old, so, but he's got kind of a timeless game in that he's a volume shooter, not the best efficiency-wise, but he can hit shots, but it's his crossover that is his killer, right? The crossover is what he's known for. He's probably got the second best handles in the history of the NBA, right? So, at least in my mind, the second best handles in the history of the NBA. Maybe third. Depends where you put Pete Maravich. I think everyone probably has Iverson at 1. Kyrie's in the conversation, too. God Shamgod is in the conversation, even though he only played 20 games in the NBA. He's still, I mean, he's named half of the moves that have names that people use for dribble moves in the NBA. So, yeah, Jason Williams too, obviously, but he doesn't like he's not unathletic. He's always been very quick, right? But he doesn't really need that athleticism for his game so much because he can cross you up, he can hit that step back jump shot, he can be a volume shooter, right?
Yeah, no, fair enough. That's interesting. Who knows what's going to happen in this transaction period? I'm trying to think what teams can take advantage of.
Who knows what's going to happen at all in 2020?
Not with that attitude.
That's not an attitude. It's just legitimately, who knows? Nobody knows what's going to happen in 2020. It's just we just get stuff happens and we just accept it because we know it's 2020 and there's no point in arguing it anyway.
Yeah, 2020 probably the worst year of my life so far.
I don't think it's the worst year of my life like on a personal level. But it's probably the worst year on a world scale that I've witnessed. I mean,
that's fair. That's probably the better statement.
What else? I mean, maybe 2001. 2001 was pretty bad on a world scale.
Yeah.
At least for, in North America. Oh, this is even bigger because this is world, right?
Yeah.
What year was SARS? Was it the same year as Katrina?
I think it was 03. Katrina's 06. I think SARS is 03 or 04.
So yeah, I mean, we'll see. You got to remember too. We're talking about it being there, but we're only 6 months into it.
Yeah.
We're only halfway through. We still got 6 more months to go here.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe the next 6 months might actually be game changing for the world and make it better. Who knows?
Be the best 6 months in world history.
Yeah. So who knows? Hopefully,
I mean,
it's
we can
time to
keep
be
our fingers
optimistic.
crossed. We got the NBA coming back, so I mean,
That's the first step.
baseball fans might not be so happy, but other sports.
Yeah. And the thing is, another thing too is that there's more of a risk of maybe potentially getting the corona because I think the MLS is doing a season in the Disney World as well. So
A
they're
lot
gonna
of
have to
leagues
share
are,
the
yeah. They're
stadium.
starting earlier though
Yeah,
too. They're starting on the 8th, I think, July 8th or something.
yeah. So they're gonna have to share the league with share with the MLS as well. So who knows if
But I
they're
don't know if that's more of a risk or really less of a risk than you can be outside because you're being quarantined inside of a dome with, let's be realistic, probably about a couple hundred of the healthiest people on the planet,
yeah,
right?
that's true.
Would you rather be locked inside of Disney World with a bunch of the healthiest people on the planet, or have to go fight through your local Sobeys with with a bunch of people that are not in the best shape ever? A bunch of
Yeah.
people who aren't professional athletes who don't have to work out 6 hours a day as their career.
No, that's totally fair. I'm just thinking more of not the athletes, but the personal staff and everything like that. But who knows? I didn't look into the rules of what the MLS is doing.
You know what? Let's give our super unqualified advice out here to the players. We got 22 teams that have qualified in here. We're gonna give our unqualified, entirely unqualified opinions on which teams should just say screw it and stay home. Uh, the Suns, that's it. I don't think I need to qualify that with anything more. Devin Booker's great. That's where the statement ends.
Yeah, just stay home.
The Spurs, I mean, you had a good run, guys. You did.
Yeah,
21 seasons, nothing to shit on. It's a good run, but it's not happening this year, guys.
sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Pop. Yeah, and you know what? Pop's what? 736 years old, right? He's the most risk of anyone here.
Yeah, we got
Probably
to
the
keep
best
them
idea for the
safe.
Spurs to just decide to stay home. The Kings, you want to say they have a chance, but then you remember they're the Kings, and the Kings
They'll
managed
find
to
a way to
shit
win.
away any chance they have ever had at being a good team. Even that, was it the 01 team, or the 04 team, sorry, that got, was it 04 team? Can't remember. The one with Donahue refereeing, where he screwed them out of the Western Conference Finals, where they probably would have won a championship and are arguably one of the best assembled teams in my mind to never win or to not win a championship. Was it Western Conference Finals? It was 2001, 2002, when they won 61 games. When they really should have beat the Lakers in that series, but then they had, what was it, 20-something foul calls against the Kings in the fourth quarter and none against the Lakers in Game 7.
Oh,
Um,
wow, that's
but I mean,
amazing.
that team had, prime Chris Webber, 24-year-old Peja Stojakovic, 23-year-old Mike Bibby, prime Doug Christie, old Vlade Divac, young Hito Turkoglu. Bobby Jackson was there. Gerald Wallace was there. Right? That was a good
Oh,
team.
wow.
It was a really good team. I mean, obviously, by the fact that they won 61 games in the regular season, we know they were a good team, but a really, really good team that, if they win that series against the Lakers, they probably win the championship.
Yeah, that's insane. I can't believe they lost. Well, I guess
Well,
the
I
refs
mean,
kind
they
of
got
helped.
cheated out of it. I mean, the referee, the head referee of that game, Donahue, that Game 7 game, literally went to jail for admitting that he intentionally he intentionally fucked up that game for gambling reasons and whatnot. But if
I've
I go to
actually
it, so
died.
Game 7 was 112 to 106 was the final for the Lakers. Yeah, okay. So in overtime, the Lakers committed 0 fouls. The Kings committed 3, 4, 7 in 5 minutes of overtime. They called 7 fouls on the Kings, and they ended up losing by 6 points in overtime.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's actually...
Yeah, it's, I mean, of the, so the Lakers scored 12 points in the overtime quarter, for 8 of those were free throws. So there was a little bit of an unfair game there. So my point is, even when you give them one of the best rosters of all time, the world is going to find a way to not let the Kings win. So if you're the Kings, stay home every year. New Orleans, they were surging.
They're going to have to go.
They were surging near the end of the year. They would bite themselves if they didn't go, right? That would be the ultimate what if for them, right? Because they were surging since Zion came back from his injury and that. They were coming close. Memphis wasn't doing so hot. New Orleans was catching up. They do have a good team. Zion, but it goes beyond Zion as well. Brandon Ingram has had a fantastic season.
Yeah.
Drew Holiday is one of the best defensive point guards in the NBA and an incredibly underrated player. Yeah, like JJ Redick too is one of my favorite players of all time. Just the shooting that he brings to your team, the offensive surge that he brings to your team, whether he's coming off the bench or starting, is just amazing. Lonzo Ball has been having a pretty decent year, for Lonzo Ball standards. He's actually shooting over 40%, so, which it's sad that that's a good thing, but it is a good thing for Lonzo. So, very, very solid roster. So they've got to give it a shot. Young roster too, so. Yeah, New Orleans, and I think that's pretty much the cutoff. Now, this is the tough one for me. Portland.
Is Portland gonna win? Probably not. I don't think Portland's gonna win an NBA title in the Lillard era. I'm sorry, Trailblazer fans, but it's the truth.
I think even if they get the 8th seed, you get the 8th seed, you're playing the Lakers in the first round. It's one thing to be the Pelicans. If you're the Pelicans and you get the 8th seed and you even win one game in that series against the Lakers, that's huge momentum for the next year, right? Portland's coming off of losing in the Western Conference Finals, right? Maybe it's best for them to just not come back and not try and be like, scratch it, it was a COVID year, we don't have to worry about it, just ignore that year, move on to next year with a clean slate. Right? Because is it better to come back next year and say we got screwed out of a chance to have another great year based on the fact that the season got, hemorrhaged right in the middle of it, or to say we came back, we tried, and we got swept by the Lakers in the first round?
Yeah. Just chalk it up as blame it on COVID.
Yeah. So if I'm Portland, I think I'm staying home. And we've already heard our star player voice possible displeasure at coming back. Carmelo, who's also on the team, is the only one we know verified as saying, questioning whether or not he wants to come back. So you got two guys right there that are not exactly low-profile guys, that might be opposed to this. So,
Yeah, no. Totally. I was gonna say. Yeah. Sorry, my bad.
No, that was the statement. If I'm Portland, I might stay home.
Yeah, no, don't blame me. But it's interesting that Carmelo voiced that he doesn't want to come back, even though he wasn't playing for a year.
It's not so much that he voiced that he personally didn't want to come back. He's just one of the only players that has said that there is contention among the players on whether or not they want to come back. It's not like he said, me personally, I don't want to play, right? But I get it, too, if I'm him, regardless of the attempt to come back for the season and that. He's you're getting older. Not everybody's LeBron. Not everybody's built like LeBron and can just go for forever, right? Do you want to come back after that, risk that injury, risk coming back to play as an 8 seed in the playoffs?
Yeah, fair enough.
Like I understand it. I'd understand it if Carmelo didn't want to as well. It makes sense. It makes sense to me for a lot of older players that are on those fringe teams.
Yeah, the ones with families and everything like that. So
The other one is the lone Eastern Conference fringe team, the Wizards. To me, yeah, you know what? Stay home. You got to win 6 games and hope Orlando loses at least 4 in order for you to have a shot at this thing anyway. Why bother? And John Wall's not going to be playing, so you're basically Bradley Beal versus the world if you're the Wizards, and you're going to be going up against Milwaukee in the first round. Best case
yeah, you're just gonna
scenario,
get slapped.
right? Not necessarily best case scenario. Best case scenario, you pass Brooklyn as well and end up in the 7 seed, but then even still, you're playing Toronto, and if you're, the Washington Bradley Beals.
It's not gonna be a pretty sight.
So there
The
you go.
seventh
The
seventh
only
and eighth seed, no thank you.
Exactly. So there you go. The only team that this is worth it for to come back is the Pelicans.
Yeah.
So it should just be
Which,
the top 16 teams come back and the Pelicans, and we'll see what happens. And that, you
wow,
know
it's
what?
hilarious.
That fulfills exactly what the NBA actually wanted with this too, which is getting Zion Williamson back on the court.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
The only thing is, it's not as transparent.
Yeah, it just fulfills the conspiracy theory even more,
More
and
transparent, I should
people are
say.
gonna yeah, and more people are gonna be riding that conspiracy train.
But honestly, who would take real fault in the NBA in wanting to give Zion a chance to come back in this thing? We all want to see Zion, right? Realistically, I want to see Zion play.
Uh,
One of the most
not on the
fun
Celtics.
games
I
of this
don't care.
season. One of the most fun games of this season for me was watching Zion's debut. That was amazing. The emotion, the vibe on like NBA Twitter, all that stuff. It was huge. Zion coming in was big, and I don't think there's anyone that dislikes Zion. Zion is such a likable human being. Just beyond the fact that he's a fantastic basketball player, he's a likable dude, right? So I don't see why anyone would be content with or have contention to him getting a shot, especially with the way they were surging at the end of the season, right? Why not? Also, I already stated I'm a huge JJ Redick fan, and I want to see him keep the playoff streak alive.
Yeah, I understand, but if you're anyone other than if you're one of the fans of those teams that are in contention, you're probably like, wow, the NBA is against our team and blah blah blah. You know how it is.
It's not like
That's
they're
probably what
13th, they're 10th. Maybe, fine, let Portland come as well. Right? So go with the top 10 in the West and the top 8 in the East. There you go. Actually, go with the top 10 in the West. The top 8 in the East have the Pelicans and the Blazers have a wild card type series to see who gets to square off in that do or die against Memphis for that 8th seed. And then you also have the thing you're planning already with the 2 games where Memphis needs to win 1, New Orleans needs to win 2, and then you get Zion versus Jam Morant for your play-in decision.
Yeah, and your rookie of the year.
Exactly, right? That's let's be real. In a dream world, that's what we want to see is New Orleans comes within 4 games of Memphis, and that play-in in the West is Memphis versus New Orleans, right?
Yeah.
We all want to see that. 2 games, Zion versus Ja head-to-head.
That'd be good. That'd be fun to watch.
Exactly. It's probably the best case scenario here, right? Like, there's not really any other matchup I would rather see. Although, I will say, Memphis versus Sacramento would be a fun matchup.
That's true.
But other than that, I don't care about, Memphis versus the Spurs, Memphis versus the Suns, Memphis versus the Trailblazers. it's the Pelicans and the Kings a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Now that you talk about it, I am kind of more interested in seeing Zion versus Ja, even though I still think Ja should win Rookie of the Year. Ooh.
Well, there you go. That'll decide it too, right? If Zion wins in the 2-game play-in and beats Ja twice, give it to Zion instead of leaving it up to the votes, because we all know 1 and 2 is going to be Ja and Zion, even though Zion only played 17, 19 games or something like that.
Yeah.
We all know it's still going to finish, Ja and Zion 1 and 2. So have it whichever one of those two gets their team to qualify and makes it in, gets Rookie of the Year. A little consolation prize to this weird play-in tournament thing.
Yeah, no, let's do that. That's fair. Fine.
There we go. So everyone stay home except the Pelicans and the Kings. And then we'll have the 16 best teams plus the Pelicans plus the Kings, and we'll see what happens and give that a shot. It's the most exciting
we just fixed
basketball.
NBA.
Right? It's a better plan. Right? There you go. I gave them a better plan. You can still play your 8 games. You can still have all the teams play their 8 games going into it, because that was a concern, right? You wanted them to be able to get into game shape, play some games going in. There you go. You can still have them play 8 games, just have it only be 18 teams instead of 22 teams.
Yeah. Let's do that.
Yeah.
NBA, I hope you're listening, because we're experts. We know exactly what we're talking about.
I did start this by saying entirely unqualified opinion, so.
Yeah, well, I'm.
You're qualifying the opinion?
Yes, that's what I'm gonna do.
You're giving it your stamp of approval, the Xavier Barnett stamp of approval.
Yeah, Xavier is an expert on things, and once I put the approval on it, it's a go time. They gotta listen.
It's kind of like the Zorro Z. It's just a big X across the. At the bottom of it, it's a big parchment, like an old school burnt corners parchment, filled out in handwriting and then stamped with an X on the bottom.
Oh, those ones. I was thinking of the one with the red ink and giant X in it because people put their family sigil in there and everything like that.
It sounds like it's some kind of like an inquisition hunting down like a heretic or something. Like a note you'd see stapled to your door in like the Middle Ages when you come home. It's like, we have determined you have the plague. We're going to burn you at the stake at 3:00 tomorrow. X.
Yes. Oh man.
So that's the plan for the 22 teams we think might be in there. There's one thing we do know for sure, though, is that there's 8 teams that are a bit more disappointed. There's 8 teams that won't be coming back, or maybe they're not disappointed. Maybe they're happy they don't have to come back and play. But real quickly, to coming up on nearing the end of our weekly podcast here. What do you think, for fun here, what do you think is the biggest need officially for each of these 8 teams that we know are bad, that we know aren't going to be in the playoffs? Because it's a weird year for them, even if we did finish this season, in that the Golden State Warriors are possibly getting the first overall pick, right? They have the best shot at the first overall pick. Now, the Golden State Warriors are going to contend for a top 2 seed in the Western Conference next year, and they have the number 1 pick. Possibly.
Yeah. So we're going to start with their need. Their need is get healthy and pretty much continue where they left off, go back to the classic Golden State pre-Kevin Durant era, where Steph was just shooting out of his mind, and Clay was shooting out of his mind, and they have a number 1 pick. Some people are saying they should shop Andrew Wiggins. I mean, it doesn't hurt to have him on offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think Andrew Wiggins is a great fit for the Warriors to replace Kevin Durant there. I mean, what they basically did was go back in time and get Harrison Barnes back.
Yeah, pretty much.
But
that's what.
Yeah, like it's the word need might not really fit well with the Warriors because they don't really need to do anything because they're going to compete next year no matter what they do. That being said, let's say like just hypothetically I know he's not the consensus number one, but I like this idea so much I'm throwing it out there. Let's say they draft James Wiseman. James Wiseman is a 7-foot center who can shoot like Kevin Durant. Now, if your starting lineup next year is Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, Draymond Green, and James Wiseman, I would argue that that roster might be better than the 2018-19 roster with DeMarcus Cousins injured for most of the season.
Yeah, that team sounds like it's going to shoot the lights off the team. And James Wiseman's going to have the best looks ever as a rookie. He'll probably be Rookie of the Year if the Golden State draft him number one.
I preface it by saying at the moment he isn't the consensus, number one selection. He was coming into the year. Now the whole issues with his eligibility with Memphis and all that stuff and that weird thing with him not playing for the year didn't help his standings too much. But he's still considered a top 3 prospect in the draft class. He fits a position that I don't want to say they really need because the Warriors don't ever need a center in the way they play. But it doesn't hurt to have a guy who's 7'1" and is a good shooter out there on top of it, right? Because what else you can do? Like Anthony Edwards is the consensus number one. What are you going to do? Add Anthony Edwards, who is a shooting guard, and have him play 13 minutes per game behind Wiggins and Klay Thompson, who we know Klay Thompson's going to play like 34, 35 minutes per game. But let's not forget the fact that Wiggins, since he has entered the league, has played more minutes than any other player in the NBA since he's entered the league. That's what he does. He just plays a lot, right? He might not be the best. He just plays a lot. He absorbs those minutes for you, right? He's like a long reliever in your pitching staff if you're a baseball team, right? He's the guy who's gonna eat up those innings and absorb those minutes for you. So your guys who are probably gonna play the 2 most minutes on the team are the 2 positions that Anthony Edwards would play in the NBA. So do you want to go with that guy and have him play 13 minutes per game, possibly be a better player overall, or take a shot at a guy who's going to be a starter on your team?
Yeah, I get for Golden State it's different because usually you pick, I know most people in the draft, they say pick best available instead of best what you need, and then fill. Some people say pick best available and fill what you need in the off season. But for Golden State, do you really want to pay the number one draft pick money to a guy that's going to give you 13 minutes a game? Kind of seems like a little bit of waste of money. And so I'd say the window's big. The window's not closing, but you want to keep the window even longer. Just start off with get James Wiseman, because I feel like that team would shoot the lights out of pretty much shoot the lights out of any team. And like I said, with James Wiseman, he'll probably get a lot of good looks because teams are going to be focusing their defense around Klay and Steph, and then probably third option Wiggins. So that leaves Draymond and Thing. Everybody's a good passer. Well, I'm not so sure about Wiggins, but everybody's a really good passer besides everyone else. So yeah, I'd say might as well go with James.
The other route, of course, is Obi Toppin, the power forward out of Dayton, which the only reason I even throw him in there as a shot for Golden State, because I mean Draymond Green is their power forward, is because with Golden State's lineups he can play center, right? The way Golden State plays, you can throw him in at center. He doesn't play like a center at all. He plays closer to a kind of small forward style of basketball than a center style as a power forward. But he, with Golden State, the way they are, we've seen them start Draymond Green at center before, right? So, and Draymond Green is definitely a power forward / small forward, right? He's not, Yeah, like the way he plays, like his play style and that. So Obi Toppin is also a choice, also a good shooter. Shot 39% last year from the field as a power forward in college. For Dayton, who were a shocking team, but the biggest reason I put James Wiseman over him for this argument is the fact that Obi Toppin is 22 and James Wiseman is 19.
Fair point.
Past them, though, the ones that have the least question out of any of those 8 teams, we go on to like Cleveland is probably the next worst. Minnesota's pretty bad, but they've got a little bit more of an outlook with D'Angelo there and that, and obviously Karl Anthony Towns. Those two may be working it out and getting something going together. It's a little bit of a promising future there. Cleveland, I almost said I had to stop myself from kind of ripping on them a little more than I want to because their roster isn't as terrible as you would think. Colin Sexton has been great this year. He's probably been one of the biggest surprises to me. 20 points per game this year. I thought he was going to be a guy that was going to have to move over to point guard in the NBA and become lean more on his passing. But he's proven me wrong entirely. Shooting 47% as a 2-guard in your second year in the league and scoring 20 points per game. There's not a lot of guys can do that. That's pretty damn good. So, kudos to Colin Sexton there. And of course, picking up Andre Drummond was big too, if he resigns and sticks around.
Yeah, that's a big if.
The biggest hit to Cleveland is the fact that for some reason last year they drafted Darius Garland, who is pretty much going to play the same positions as Colin Sexton.
Yeah, it's maybe they're trying to form a dual backcourt with those two guys.
To me, the biggest things that Cleveland needs to do going into next season is try to make sure you can lock up Drummond long term to stick around. And I say that as a Detroit Pistons fan who probably for the last 3 years has been asking for the Pistons to please get rid of Drummond. So for me to say that is a big deal. They need to re-sign Drummond long term. He's 26 years old. You got a center you can base your team, not necessarily base your team around, but not need to worry about the position, right? He's going to be down there getting your rebounds, kicking it out to your shooters and that, and he's still 26 years old with very solid experience and a multi-time All-Star in the NBA. So re-sign him and finally just get rid of Kevin Love. Find a way to do it. Find a way to get something in return for Kevin Love. It doesn't have to be great. Just get something in return for that contract.
Yeah, you got to dump that salary. Find something. You're not,
especially when you're playing Tristan Thompson a max contract, right?
Yeah, these two guys. Wow, I can't believe Tristan Thompson has a max too.
Well, it was a max when he signed it. It's not technically the max anymore, but it's still a lot of money to pay Tristan Thompson.
Yeah,
sorry. Especially when the second best player on your team is Andre Drummond, who plays the same position as Tristan Thompson, and you can't exactly move Tristan Thompson from that position. He is a center that can maybe play some light minutes at power forward.
Yeah. That's insane. Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all. Cleveland, they're not going to be... It'll probably take a couple of years before they get really... But they can start competing again. But yeah, the first step is dump Kevin Love. I'd even say dump Tristan Thompson too. But those two things.
Kevin Love has 3 more years on his contract at $31 million per.
Yeah, that's insane. I don't know what team's gonna dump. What team is gonna take Kevin Love? That's the thing.
I mean, if you're a contender. You know where I'd really like to see Kevin Love? Because they have the money and I think he would fit well? Miami.
Oh. That could work.
Because Miami, they pay Jimmy Butler, Goran Dragic, and then they have a ton of guys who are on rookie contracts, right? So paying Kevin Love doesn't hurt you that much. And Miami's whole team is Jimmy Butler and a bunch of shooters. And what is Kevin Love as a power forward? He's a great shooter and a good rebounder. And with playing alongside Bam Adebayo, too, that's great floor spacing, right?
Yeah. I guess Miami could be a spot for him. that could work out if Miami would take it. Depends on when their rookie contracts go up to, but
I
I'm
think
guessing
it's
in 3 years.
well. The thing too is their guys are all mostly shooters that are on rookie deals, and they're going to be restricted free agents after that. So you're going to have a chance to lock them up without too much hit to your salary cap anyway. By the time those 3 more years are up on Kevin Love's contract, that's when you're going to be re-signing everybody and have to worry about salary cap ramifications anyway. So as long as you keep the same team kind of assembled and don't do too much to try to get higher paid players there, and I don't know how long Goran Dragic's not career, but contract has left on it, but he's not going to make anywhere near what he's making now when he resigns, right? So whether that's with Miami or not, so you have the space, and you're not going to need that money in those 3 years.
Yeah, that's totally true.
In terms
So I
of
guess that's what Cleveland has to do.
Yeah, and in terms of what they need to add, they need a small forward. they need to get rid of some of their bigs, their big forwards, and pick up a small forward. Kevin Porter Jr. might be the guy there. It's tough to say. We only saw him for 23 minutes per game last year through 50 games. 19 years old, he was averaging 10 points per game, so there's a chance, and he's a really good shooter. Better than his 33% three-point percent shows last year. He is a very good shooter. So he could develop into something, so there's a chance there, but either way, you need another three anyway, or preferably a guy who can play the 3 and the 2.
Yeah, for sure.
For those situations that you want to bump Colin Sexton into that one spot, to play at the point. Obi Toppin might be a great pick for them there. Anthony Edwards would be a very good pick for them there too if they have the number 2 pick if he makes it past number 1. So even LaMelo Ball would be a solid pick for Cleveland, right? Have that as your starting backcourt, LaMelo Ball and Colin Sexton. That sounds good to me.
Not bad, but then that's another point guard, and they have a point guard already, so.
I mean, Darius Garland is their starting point guard all season. He's a rookie. He was a rookie, yeah, 20 years old, but he wasn't anything really special. He barely scratched 40% shooting to average 12 points and almost 4 assists, right? I don't think there's anyone arguing that Darius Garland is better than LaMelo Ball.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I guess you want to see if they can develop, and if he does fall, you might as well take a chance and see what you can do with him.
Moving on.
See if you can.
Sorry, go ahead.
See if you can produce some more life and spark to the offense.
Exactly. Plus, if you get rid of those big contracts, then that's pretty much all you really have to worry about for sizable contracts, aside from whatever you pay Drummond, right? So
yeah.
They've got a lot of young guys on the team. I think they'd be all right to build around that backcourt and still keep Garland there. It's not going to put them in too much of a hole. Minnesota, really, the thing they need the most is to just have their team play together healthy. Because D'Angelo Russell was only there for 12 games. Karl Anthony Towns only played 35 games last season. Malik Beasley was only there for 14 games last season. Juan Hernan Gomez only played 14. Jeff Teague only played 34, right? You have to go until the player that played, you have to go until the 10th spot in their rotation to hit a guy that played 60 games this season. To hit a guy that played 50 games this season, you have to go all the way down to the 10th spot in their rotation. So I think a big thing for Minnesota is going to be see what you have with this team healthy. Because D'Angelo Russell is 23, Karl Anthony Towns is 24, Hernan Gomez is 24, Malik Beasley, who was a 20-point-per-game scorer in those 14 games he played with Minnesota last year, is 23. So see what you got with this young team. And I think that's what you do with Minnesota. I don't think they really need to do anything aside from maybe pick up some vets to help out the young guys with their development.
Yeah, no, for sure. You gotta just not panic and see what you got with this team, because injuries seem to be pretty hefty around there. And this was Who's their coach? Was Tom Thibodeau their coach? Did they just fire him?
No, Tom Thibodeau's been out of Minnesota for a little while. He's been gone since the
Okay.
last Jimmy Butler year. Who is their coach?
Oh yeah.
It's Ryan
Ryan
Saunders, I
Saunders.
think, is their coach. Ryan Saunders. Um, and he's young coach. Give him a shot with the young team. See what happens. He's only 33 years old, so like your coach is barely older than half your players. So give him a shot and see what he can do. He didn't have much of a fair shake this year, so it'd be rough to just replace him, or heartless to just replace him.
Yeah, we've seen worse happen.
And I think with Atlanta, the same kind of thing goes, right? You have a really, really young team. See what you got. Ride it out. You're going to have a decent draft pick. See what you can get. If you're Atlanta and James Wiseman falls to you, whew, perfect. That's the perfect person to fall to your team right now. That's like the one position you need to fill is center, right? Obi Toppin would be great for Atlanta as well. So, Atlanta's actually in a pretty good spot, realistically. Trae Young is 21 years old, John Collins 22 years old, DeAndre Hunter's 22, Kevin Huerter's 21, Cam Reddish is 20, and those are the guys who started the most games for you last year. That was your core last year was Cam Reddish, Kevin Huerter, DeAndre Hunter, John Collins, and Trae Young, and every single one of them is 22 or younger.
Yeah, you got a very young core, so yeah, see where they take you.
Yeah, add another high draft pick to that list, and then see what you got. I think that's the best thing to do if you're Atlanta. Just sit pat. Detroit. Detroit might be in the worst position of any team in the NBA coming into this offseason, aside from maybe the Knicks. I think Detroit and the Knicks are the two teams that are the furthest away from actually being able to do something with what they have on their rosters. The best player on the Pistons is a crippled 31-year-old Derrick Rose and a 30-year-old Blake Griffin who hasn't played a full season in 4 years.
Yeah, I don't know what Detroit can do. I don't know what Dwayne Casey can work with over here, right? Too. They got a pretty decent coach, but yeah, their roster is now that they dumped Andre Drummond. I don't know what position they got to do. It's total rebuild, pretty much.
They need everything. They need every position.
Yeah. Yeah, total rebuild for sure. Then yeah, they just pretty much need every single position.
It's a mess. I don't know if I've ever seen a roster this hopeless in the NBA before. It's so hard to see what they can do with this. Siko Doumbia and Sviatov Svi and Siko Doumbia are probably the only two players that are. I mean, you could argue Luke Kennard as well, depending on how he comes back from injury and that, but he's missed a lot of games. But those three are the only ones really worth a damn on the team at all in terms of value for trades, value for building your team around anything, and all three of them play the same position. I mean, you got Christian Wood there as well, who came out last year and killed it when he came in. He was the whole reason they were fine with getting rid of Drummond, right? But he's also an unrestricted free agent.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't know what Detroit is doing.
I don't think anybody does.
Is Detroit on a 1 year? Is Derrick Rose on a 1 year contract too with Detroit?
No, 2 years. He's got another year in Detroit. And for everything, it seems like he wants to stay in Detroit. So, he's said all along he wants to be in Detroit. So that's why they didn't trade him, and I can't see them trading him. Having a guy on your team that actually wants to be there, I think, is a bit more valuable than anything they'd be able to get for a 31-year-old Derrick Rose.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Especially when you're Detroit. Not only as a team, but as a city, having a guy who wants to live in who is choosing to want to live in your city.
Yeah, I've been to Detroit. It's not the greatest place, and It's one of those cities with all the crazy scooters. That's like a place in California where they just pick up scooters and just dump it on the middle of the street, which is just so odd to
Um, as
me.
as far as the draft for the Pistons, again, just I don't know. Whoever they have the fifth pick, or are projected to have the fifth pick, whoever the best player on the board is, there, just take him because you need everything. So hell with it, right? Whoever ends up being the best player on the board, just take him. And then you got the Knicks, who have 306 power forwards on their roster. All of them who should probably be backup power forwards. So they're probably in. I'm gonna say they're the only team that's in a worse position than Detroit because they also have to deal with James Dolan on top of a terrible roster.
Yeah.
The number one thing that the Knicks need to do is get rid of James Dolan. I think that's. I don't think anyone's gonna disagree with that. Am I right on that one?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I don't think James Dolan is ever. If James Dolan's still in charge, then it's not going to be good for the Knicks. And then, but also the rumor is that they might hire Tom Thibodeau. So, R.I.P. Knicks, you guys are going down, back to the trash can.
Yeah,
Even though you never left, but
it's not even a roster thing. Their roster is terrible too, but it's you got to get rid of James Dolan before he can really do anything if you're the Knicks. And if you're Tom Thibodeau, what are you going to do? Start a lineup of 5 power forwards and play them all 46 minutes per game? Because that's what it's looking like. That would be
R.J. Barrett.
that's probably the worst team that Tom Thibodeau could coach.
Yeah,
That would be
well,
the
has
worst
Todd.
fit for Tom Thibodeau.
Yeah, no, for sure. Um, uh, R.J. Barrett advice: get out while you can.
I mean, it's a great
And that's it.
opportunity to be the best player on the Knicks, right? Like that is a good career opportunity, the most valuable franchise in sports. So if you can make it work, you make it work. But it's not easy to do with James Dolan as the owner there. Um, Chicago, I'm not sure why they were as bad as they were this season because I like Zach LaVine. Lauri Markkanen is good. I think the problem with Chicago was their coaching this season. It just didn't work. Jim Boylan in the NBA is not an NBA coach. I think it's an experiment that they need to cut short right now. I don't care how much money they paid him. Admit you're wrong and move on because you've got some players on this team and some players that are just hitting their primes of their careers that you might be able to do something with. Get a coach that fits your roster a little better.
Yeah, no, for sure. Uh, I've been paying attention to Chicago because no one does anymore. Because ever since the Jordan era, but yeah. So I have nothing but to agree with you.
Speaking of Jordan, the next worst team, the Charlotte Hornets, Michael Jordan's team, uh, in a pretty rough spot as well. They're another thing like the Pistons where I just say, when it comes to the draft, just take the best player you can because they need everything. Their two best players play the same position, so that's a little bit of a a little bit of a hitch there. Terry Rozier and Devonte Graham. They've been putting Terry Rozier at the 2, but it's rough. He's a guy who needs the ball in his hands more than anything. So when Terry Rozier and Devonte Graham are your two best players, to start with, that's not a great statement to begin with. But they also play the same position, so they're in the same spot where they just need to get some players on this roster and try to see what they can do with it. There's not really any specific one area of need they really need to fill. Aside from maybe, just a scorer. Like, they need to get a scorer. Because offensively, defensively they're not great, but offensively they don't have a go-to guy. And when you're a young team, I think that's the place in today's NBA you got to start to build around. So yeah, take the best scorer you can on the board when it comes time for the draft. And the last team of the 8, the Phoenix Suns. Fittingly, I think, aside from the Warriors and Maybe Minnesota have the least to do here, really. I don't know why. Again, the Phoenix Suns are a conundrum to me. I don't know why they have been as bad as they have been. Devin Booker is in my mind a top 3 two guard in the NBA right now. He's a great defender, an incredible shooter. He's a good passer for a two guard. He's increased his assists per game every year. He's increased his points per game every year too. 26 points per game on 48% shooting, 36% from 3 last year, 92% from the free throw line, 6.5 assists per game. They added DeAndre Ayton, of course, the year before as a rookie with the number 1 pick. 19 points, 12 rebounds per game last season. If he can stay healthy, I don't think Phoenix is actually in a very bad position at all. They have Dario Saric there as well now, who I think is an incredibly underrated player. Mikal Bridges is going to come into his own eventually. I'm a fan of Phoenix's roster.
Yeah, but they also got Ricky Rubio, and he's injury prone as hell.
Yeah, but Ricky Rubio isn't a core player that they're looking to build around for the future. Ricky Rubio's playing point guard so that Devin Booker doesn't have to play point guard, right? They signed Ricky Rubio so that Devin Booker could play his natural position as a two guard again instead of having to play point guard like he had to before, right? And let's not forget, you say injury prone, he played 57 games last season out of the 62 that his team had, and he averaged 8.9 assists per game and was 3rd on the team in scoring. So, you say that, but he was pretty good last year, and he did what Ricky Rubio was going to do, right? He's a guy who for his career is an 8 assists per game guy. He's not going to shoot very well. He's still only 29 years old. He's going to be 30 coming into next season. He's played, since 2015-16, he played 76 games, 75 games, 77 games, 68, 57. So, I don't see too many issues with Rubio. Do you want to get younger at the position? Maybe. But realistically, I think he's a fine fit alongside Booker.
Fair enough. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. And that rounds out the 8 teams that are officially not going to Disney World. It seems like we're running down to the stretch run here, but in reality, we've still got over a month and a half for things to be sorted out here. So we'll see how things round out by the time we get to that July 30th date, and we'll try to keep you up to date as much as we can along the way as we get you there. But until next week, this has been Pure Point Weekly. My name is Jeff Blackman.
And I'm Xavier Barnett.